back to the secrets of happily ever after. I am so excited about my guest today. She is my very favorite person who speaks on marriage. She is Dr. Jennifer Finlayson Fife, a relationship and sexuality educator and coach, as well as a licensed clinical professional counselor in Illinois with a PhD in counseling psychology from Boston College. She currently teaches online courses and live workshops to individuals and couples seeking to develop their capacity for deeper emotional and sexual intimacy. Additionally, she offers limited private and group coaching services to individuals and couples who have benefited from her podcasts and courses and are looking for more direct input on improving their lives and relationships. Welcome, Dr. Jennifer Finlayson Fife. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you. I just want to get as much information as we possibly can. So I'll start with the question I'm asking everybody, which is, if you had the undivided attention of all the married couples in all the world for just a few minutes, what is the most important concept you could teach them about how to live happily ever after with their spouse?
Well, I think what I would say is that you can't live happily ever after in a relationship unless you develop as a person, unless you look at your inherent limitations in loving, because we aren't just born with wisdom and capacity, and you grow yourself into someone who's capable of really caring for another human being and being cared for. And so that's a skill one develops. And you can't control other people. We can only control ourselves. We can see other people and we see where they are missing things. That's kind of a liability or a limitation, is we can often see others well, but we can't see ourselves well. And yet we need to learn about who we are in our relationships to become a more developed person.
So in your professional opinion, do you think that that's something most couples could do on their own? Or do you think that they generally need help from a coach or a clinician or somebody?
Well, we cannot do it on our own. Now, that's a little different than do we need a coach or a counselor? But that is to say, because we are acting in the world in ways that our mind tells us are sufficient, right? Or that are justified, we often can't actually see ourselves honestly, except to get honest feedback from the people that we interact with. The challenge, of course, with our spouse or other important people is that they often have their own blind spots. And so their feedback has a limitation in it. The great thing about a wise third party, whether that's a clergy member or a therapist or just a good, wise friend, is that they often can see how you're interacting around the problem and can give you a kind of more intelligence about who you actually are. So it increases your choices or your wisdom about who you are. And we all need that. So we need other people to help us know ourselves.
Yes, that's so good. So good. So I wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to talk to you about a subject that I think you teach and speak about better than anyone else. And that is the concept of differentiation. Can you give us a working definition of differentiation and then explain why it's such a crucial element to living happily ever after with other humans?
Sure. So differentiation is a psychological process that human beings are engaged in, although we don't necessarily all kind of move along that spectrum. And that is to say, I'm going to try and give you a succinct version, but when we start out, we are psychologically enmeshed, and there's nothing wrong with that. We don't really have an option. So that is that we, in the beginning, have to learn a self-concept through other people. We're looking to others to tell us if we're okay, if we're acceptable, and we have to start there. The differentiation, though, is the ability to grow out of that dependency and to become more truly who you are within the social context, but to be true to the best in you. And that is to become different than others in many respects. You fulfill the measure of your creation. You develop your talents, your gifts. you claim what are your honest thoughts and beliefs while in context of other people. The person that is differentiated is most able to hold on to their sense of who they are, what they believe, what they think, what they feel, what they desire, even when they're in close contact with important other people. And when we're less mature, right, we have a hard time doing that if it disrupts our connection. Like if you believe something different than your spouse believes, and you're in this less differentiated place, it feels like a threat both to the relationship and to your sense of self. And so it's hard to be honest and truthful, where when you're more differentiated, you can handle claiming who you are without it threatening a sense of connection and friendship with important other people.
So when people talk about like maybe they need to communicate better in their relationship, is that something that maybe a lack of differentiation is maybe more important than just learning the words to say?
Yes,
communicating?
absolutely, absolutely, because human beings are always communicating, right? So even if you're masking who you are and you're trying to hide your differing belief or something like that, there is a kind of understanding that there are limits on how exposed you're going to be, and people kind of know it on some level. When people are more differentiated, the way I would say it is they have more ability to be honest and kind. The more differentiated they are, the more enmeshed we are, the more we either pressure others to see things like we see them, or we mask who we are to keep from the invalidation or anger coming towards us.
Yeah, so that goes kind of to my next question is, like, can you talk about the ways in which we try to control each other rather than just allow each other to grow and become
right
who we are, and how this is problematic?
Right. So like most of us, we develop a sense of who we are in relationship to others, and we go around trying to replicate that same pattern to have the picture of ourselves that we want. And so in our efforts to replicate being the self that we know, we are doing one of two things. We're either pressuring others to yield to us, or we are instinctively yielding to a pressuring other, right? And so they're both efforts at control over others so that we feel okay about ourselves. So just an example of this, I was just working with a couple where he wants to be the epicenter of the marriage. He's pressuring his wife to be his support and to kind of revolve around him. He sees himself as superior to her. He grew up learning that the people that are safe in the world are in that position. So he instinctively started to recreate it in his marriage. So it's an attempt at control. I am going to look down my nose at you. I'm going to have a running critique of you because it's a way of keeping you beholden to me. And she has done the same, where she like looks to him for approval, looks to him to feel okay. That's also kind of her story, where she was always trying to earn sufficiency, earn love. But it's also an attempt at control, even though it doesn't really look like it, because she's clearly in the more one down beholden position. But she has the idea, like, if I can get him to tell me I'm okay, then I'll be safe. And he's the source. And so they are both dependent on the other, because if he was able to actually be strong in himself, he wouldn't need to push down on her or critique her. It's a defense. It's a way to tell himself and feel superior. But of course, when we're running around controlling each other, nobody's happy. It's not like, even though he's one up, he's paid a big price for doing that, because she doesn't feel safe with him. She doesn't feel open to him. She's always on guard with him. And so he never gets the kind of open-hearted love and desire that he wants. But he's also doesn't want to take the risk of being more knowable to her and more invested in her. He wants the safety of the critique. And so he unwittingly keeps getting the low desire, low honesty marriage that he's participating in.
Yeah. So like when people do things like crying when they're not getting their way, or paying for things, like what are some behaviors that come out when we're kind of trying to control each other? Just
Right.
like kind of naively, like we don't know we're doing it.
Yes. Right. Exactly. It's very human. And I say a lot of times to people, nothing's going wrong, meaning you come by this honestly, you're doing what feels intuitive, but let me help you see the cost of it, because that helps people see themselves and do differently. But to your question is, well, there's the overt and the covert forms of control. So there's overt, which is just critical, condemning, demanding, like just intimidating, right? We can do that kind of control. Everybody knows that kind of sort of overt abusiveness or overt demandingness. But then we can do covert forms, which is like the martyr position, or the I'm too fragile, I'm too weak, don't make me uncomfortable, I'm going to be depressed for a week if you guys don't do what I want. So there's also control from a one down or a weak position. And then there's still another version of that, which is I will do whatever you want, just love me. It's also attempt at control. Like, I want to know I'm safe, so I'm just going to never make you unhappy with me, or expose aspects of myself that you won't like. And so it's a self-betrayal, but it's still an attempt at trying to get a security that you want, even though it's at your expense and the expense of the marriage or the relationship.
And how do you break these cycles? Because like you say that couples co-create, what they've made in their marriage. And so once they start, maybe one of them starts to realize like, this is not a healthy pattern. We're not growing. We're kind of shrinking. How do you go about breaking those patterns?
Yeah.
Once you start to see them?
Well, there's two general models of thinking, and I subscribe to one of them. And one model that's out there is that you look to your partner to validate you, to tell you you are okay, that they value or validate your way of thinking. And of course, that always feels good when your spouse does, or there's value in your spouse settling down enough to understand you or to understand how you think in the world. But I don't think in terms of the spouse being a source of love. I think sometimes we intuitively are looking to our spouse to be the parent we didn't get. And you're going to lock this person in, they promised God or they've said they're going to love you no matter what. So you're kind of hoping that you can get what you've always wanted. And that certainly, I understand that absolutely intuitively, but it doesn't work because they're often looking to you to reassure them and to make them feel better. And so nobody's got the full gas tank. Everybody's, working from a limited place. The way that I think about it is helping people to actually move out of what Robert Keegan talks about as the subject position into it from a subjective position to an objective position. So rather than I'm just doing what makes sense, I have to be defensive because you're so critical, instead to help them step away from themselves and actually see the toxicity or the problematic aspect of their behavior, to see how they're actually inviting their spouse to be critical because they won't ever receive anything or see anything. And so their spouse kind of amps up. It doesn't mean that they're responsible for their spouse's behavior, because they always are responsible for what they choose, but they are part of a dynamic that they often can't see because they feel so justified before they talk to me or someone else who's helping them wake up to themselves. So I'm helping people to actually raise their intelligence and sort of step up a level and look and see what they're doing, because it frees them up to choose better, right? And they often go into some kind of a internal crisis, both with who they are and how they're impacting their marriage or themselves. Like sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, I don't like the disrespect I feel, but I keep participating in being disrespected because I keep agreeing to live life on my spouse's terms and not claim what I believe is true or good. So they often like start to see like I'm instinctively doing something that is bad for me, bad for my spouse, or bad for our marriage. And that often gives them the courage to choose in a better way and create a better marriage, create a better relationship to their spouse, but also to themselves.
Yes, I love that. So, like, can you describe what maybe a fully developed, mature love looks like in context of growing old together? Like the difference
Yeah.
between two individuals who have differentiated and are choosing to love each other into old age versus,
Yeah.
they just kind of defaulted there and they resent each other and they're
Right.
just doing it.
Good. Yeah. So a lot of times people get confused about differentiation. They think what it is kind of autonomy. And so people are like, well, what if I differentiate? Like, why would we even be together? Because we don't need each other. And that is that a lot of us have the idea that love is based in neediness, that there would be no other reason to share your life with someone except you need them to help you be happy or help you feel okay about yourself or whatever. But to grow into mature love, which differentiation requires, is to grow out of, I am with you because I need you to give me a sense of self. And instead, you grow into a place where I am okay. I know who I am. I matter. I don't need you to do that work. I can sustain that in myself, but I choose you. I love you. I value you. I want to share my life with you. I want to be a friend to you and join with you as we go through this journey together. So a kind of more differentiated relationship is not monogamy like as a prison, you have to love me, you said you would. It's monogamy as a choice, that I really am choosing you, care about you, will bring my best to you, will respect this relationship enough to be honest in it and to address issues both by how I may be negatively impacting it, but talking honestly to you about how you may be, because we value this friendship enough to invest in it. And so it's got a deep acceptance of the other person. It has a deep acceptance of yourself. There's a lot of friendship, not like you owe me, but I care about you and I want you to thrive. And I want to thrive too. Like I do a podcast called Room for Two. The double entendre, of course, is that the happiest marriages, the most intimate marriages, make room for two people to thrive. And those are, there's research that supports that the happiest people in marriage feel a sense that they have developed as a person, as a product of being in that marriage, that they've used it to grow into their better selves. And those are the happiest people.
I love that so much. Oh, so good. So let's take a little detour here because what do you recommend a spouse can do when they're going along in their marriage and all of a sudden one of the spouses introduce this big plot twist? For example, they leave the faith that they were both a part of, or they decide they don't want any more kids, or they're no longer in love with the other. Like, what is like, sometimes I think working through those challenges is what strengthens a marriage, but how do we have it strengthen the marriage and not tear it apart?
Yeah. Well, I would say they are at least opportunities for you to grow, whether or not the marriage stays together. Because, of course, for a marriage to get stronger, you have to have two people who are willing to face themselves and to grow. And you don't always get to control that part. And the most that we can control is our choice and being choosable, right? But still, you may be choosable and be married to somebody who doesn't any longer want to invest in a marriage. So I think of it as, at a minimum, you can use it to grow yourself up, to grow in your differentiation and wisdom. They are challenging moments, to be sure. And in my experience in working with lots of couples, they are very rich opportunities for development because they kind of shatter the marriage or the alignment as you know it. And so if a spouse introduces a plot twist, such as, I don't believe as I have, and I don't believe as you do, it really shakes the marriage up in around the question of, who are we? right? And what do I believe now that I don't have you believing the same thing? And can I choose you despite the difference in belief? And can I make room for you when I don't see the world as you do? And can I actually sustain my own thoughts and feelings and beliefs, right? Without going into a defiant belief or a compliant, I'll just see things as you do because I can't handle the change. And that pushes us really around the question of who are we? Who am I as an individual? Who are we as a couple? And can I choose this person not because he or she reinforces me? It's easier to get married under that frame, but to choose them because I care about them as a person. I care about their history. I care about how they've come to who they are, even if they see the world differently. If it's something that you feel like to choose them ruptures your, how to say it, like your self-respect, if what they want asks you to be less than who you are, or to try to earn love by going along with who they are, right? That also is the pressure point of, am I going to betray myself to keep the marriage together? Or am I willing to be true to myself and allow the marriage to end if it must, right? There's a saying that Dr. Schnarch, who was a mentor of mine, would sometimes say is that if we make the partnership more important than our self-respect, we're toast. Right? So there's often this tension that, am I trying too hard to make the other person happy that I'm going against something fundamental in myself? Or am I just claiming this is something fundamental because I don't want to grow or expand or make room? And that's a very important question in figuring out how we adapt in the face of these plot twists.
So important. And I think maybe before even making the decision of whether or not the marriage can work is understanding maybe the plot twist.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. So like the very first starting point, even though it sounds so easy to say it and is probably the hardest part, is how are you in this plot twist? How did you get here? Who are you? What does it say about you? What does it say about me, if anything? What does it say about us, if anything? Those are hard questions because we want to just make the plot twist wrong, often if we're being pulled in a way we don't want to be pulled, right? And so to just settle down enough to get data to help us revise our map is hard. We just don't want that data to even be there because we don't want to revise it in that way. And revising our maps, it sucks. I mean, it never feels good. Humans resist it all the time. But once we go through the process, we get wiser and stronger for it. Mm-hmm.
Whether it's for the marriage we're currently in or the next phase.
That's right. That's right. But it does help. See, I think marriage pushes us to grow up because our reality is being pushed by another person's reality. And we can just dig in and resent when they don't just reinforce the reality we want, or we can use their presence and their reality of who they are to expand clarity about who we are and how the world operates and what love is.
Oh, so good. Well, it's just been absolutely delightful to speak with you. I feel like I just learned so much every single time. But please tell the viewers where they can learn more about you, Room for Two, your courses and workshops.
Sure. So you can find me on my website, Finlayson-Fife.com. And on there you can, I have several things. I have a podcast that's free, just conversations with Dr. Jennifer. You can hear about faith, development, sexuality, intimacy. Then I have Room for Two, which is a subscription podcast where I'm working with actual couples and you hear me help them around issues related to sex and communication and in-laws and infidelity, the whole gamut. And so you can see yourself in these couples' stories often. That's always the feedback we get. And then I have 5 online courses, and I have kept my primary audience Latter-day Saints. So, but it really is for any person. They're very human principles. They're very much like I'm talking today about how to see who you are, how to grow who you are, and develop yourself and your capacity for intimacy, both sexually, emotionally, and so on. So there's 5 courses there on those subjects.
And I
Yeah.
highly recommend all of them. And Room for Two has just been amazing. I've loved it so much. So
Oh, I'm
thank
so
you for
glad.
doing that, because that is really just so enlightening to see you work with other couples like that.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
To learn more ways to deepen your intimacy and strengthen your relationship, make sure you watch this video next.